It's a Thor movie, but it's also a Hulk movie. Well, whoever. This movie rocks. It Ragnaroks. On this episode of Moving Panels, we discuss Thor Ragnarok. Welcome to Moving Panels, the podcast where we discuss movies and TV shows based on, inspired by, and adapted from the world of comic books. I'm your host, Laramy Wells, and joining me today is a returning guest host, but with a new last name. Please welcome Deanna Titshaw.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
It is great to have you back. Those of you who remember Deanna when she was Deanna Thomas had joined me on Days of Future Past, which was episode 2, way back in September, early October. I can't remember the exact date. But now she has returned to do, again, I'm going to play my card here, one of the best superhero movies out there.
I would agree with you. It's in my top 5 for sure.
I will say the same. I'll be honest, it probably is in my top 10. I don't know about top 5, but it's close.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we're going to talk about Thor Ragnarok, the third in the Thor titled movies. This one was released November 3rd of 2017. It kind of surprised me. I know I saw this in theaters, but I really was surprised that it wasn't a summer blockbuster movie, that it came out in November.
Yeah.
Seems like a really random time.
It was really random. I believe the most of the Avengers movies came out in May. This definitely could have been a May or June release.
Yeah, because even Iron Man came out. It was like the May kickoff summer movie. So I don't know what the thought process was to release it in November, but it was released in November. So they do change from the gritty, dark, Shakespearean Thor movies. The first Thor movie directed by famous Shakespearean actor Kenneth Branagh. And then the second horrible Thor movie, Dark World, directed by some guy I don't know or don't care because he directed a horrible movie. But this time we get Taika Waititi, or however you pronounce his name.
You're right. I think it's Taika Waititi.
Taika Waititi. Great individual.
Yes. And those first two, I can agree with you. I think the first one only is only somewhat good because it introduces us to the character of Thor. But I didn't actually really like Thor until this movie came out.
Well, I will say I kind of liked Thor a little bit more in Avengers because I like the kind of buddy nature that this movie then expands on between him and Hulk.
Yes, I was definitely okay with them being absent from Civil War to be present in this movie together.
Well, speaking of being absent from Civil War, have you ever seen the lead up to this movie that was called Team Thor?
I have not.
All right, so Team Thor, and I will be sure to post the YouTube link into the show notes for this episode. Team Thor it was 2, but then kind of 3-part shorts that were special features on some of the other movies' Blu-rays. So Team Thor Part 1 was actually released with the Captain America Civil War Blu-ray, and it tells us what Thor and Hulk were doing during Civil War.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, now it's completely comedic. It's told in a very mockumentary style. And Hulk's only in one little scene. It's Bruce Banner. It's not Hulk. It's Mark Ruffalo as Bruce Banner. Although I will say, if you think about it, it kind of causes a plot hole. But I won't get into that. This was just fun for the sake of being fun. But it shows Thor in Australia. He decides to get a roommate, and it's this guy named Daryl. We find out that Thor is a horrible roommate. He doesn't pay his end of the bills or rent. He tries to pay with Asgardian. There we go. Asgardian gold. And Daryl's telling him, this isn't worth anything here. And Thor's like, well, this is worth $1 gazillion,
Yeah.
And it's just funny. There's one moment where Daryl goes to use the bathroom, and Thor has set Mjolnir on top of the toilet, so nice. Daryl can't lift the seat. And the Mjolnir, he treats Mjolnir like a baby. he has a little bed next to his bed for Mjolnir. And there's a part where he's sits Mjolnir in a high chair and actually has a little bowl of food in front of him. And then part 2 that continues it was released with Doctor Strange. But then there's actually a part 3 that was released with this movie, with Thor Ragnarok, in which it's called Team Daryl. And Daryl gets a new roommate, and it's the Grand Master.
Nice.
Yeah, and so it's pretty fun. So I will definitely, Marvel has put it on YouTube, all 3 parts together. It's like 14 minutes to watch all of it. So I will definitely make sure to get that link put into the show notes so everybody can go view that fun if they've never seen it.
I will definitely be watching it after we are done.
All right, so let's get into the movie Thor Ragnarok. We're not going to hit the character of Thor into depth. We'll save that for an episode where we're actually talking about the first movie. So, of course, we do get the returning Chris Hemsworth with a new look, which I'll talk about a little bit later. That does come from the comic books, his look for this movie. He gets a new look. We do get more of that humor side, which I think came out a little bit in the first Thor movie. It was definitely in Avengers. There wasn't much of it to show in Dark World because that... but we definitely get a more humorous take on Thor in this one. Loki returns with Tom Hiddleston, even though we believed he had died at the end of Dark World, and they recreate all of that, but then we find out that he's posing as Odin. And
in the Dark World, I believe they show that.
Yeah, we do see that in Dark World. But Thor, Thor didn't know that until this movie. Mm-hmm. I will say this movie, though, gives us really the first time that Loki, from almost beginning to end, I mean, you can kind of argue the him being Odin at the beginning, but really from beginning to end, Loki's a good guy for this entire movie.
I would definitely agree with you. I think we really just see more of the god of mischief. Like, he's mischievous, but he's not really evil or like that.
Yeah, and he does try to betray Thor later into the movie, but then that's just a quick little moment, and it causes for a funny little scene where he gets electrocuted, but he's pretty much a good guy for the entire movie, which is something that I know a lot of people are a big fan of, is the good guy Loki. Completely goes against the comic books, but it's worked for the movie. We also get the Hulk in this one, played once again by Mark Ruffalo. It does explain what happened after Age of Ultron. So in Age of Ultron, there's the part where Hulk is in the Quinjet and Black Widow is telling him, okay, you can turn around, you can come back. And we do see that little video replay in this movie. So we do find out, even though in Age of Ultron, they tried to explain that he was still on Earth, because there's a scene at the end of Age of Ultron where Fury says, hey, we think we got the signal of the Quinjet somewhere in the ocean, but it was vague enough that they were able in this movie to say, nope, he ended up in space and somehow ended up on Sakaar, and it all worked out there. So my thing about this, as I said in my little opening, this is probably the closest, I hate to say it, but this is probably the closest we're ever going to get to a Hulk movie.
Other than the other Hulk movies that no one wants to talk about.
Yeah, no, I mean the Mark Ruffalo Hulk, the Hulk that we have now all accepted. We are not. Absolutely. Yeah, it's sad that the Eric Bana Hulk, the Edward Norton Incredible Hulk, that those are the movies that, don't exist. Even though the Incredible Hulk is supposed to be a part of this MCU and Avengers storyline, they pretty much just act like it never happened. Mm-hmm. Now that we have Mark Ruffalo and we fell in love with him with me, it was the moment he said, I'm always angry. Like that, from that moment on, I was like, Mark Ruffalo is my Incredible Hulk. But I really don't think they're ever going to try to do another Hulk solo movie, and I think this is the closest we will get.
I will definitely agree with you on that. I think since they already spent time making 2 Hulk movies and those kind of flopped, they gave Mark Ruffalo more of stardom in this movie, and that's really all they can do with that.
Yeah, It's sad though, and I'm going to get more into this when we get into the moving panels in the second half of the show. I like that this is Planet Hulk, but then I also don't like that it's not Planet Hulk.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would.
Because is Planet Hulk Sakaar in the comics?
Yes.
Is it that planet? Okay,
it is
so
Sakaar. I mean, that's again. We'll get into more of when I'm talking about the moving panels, but that's really where it ends. So our big villain in this one is Hela. So we'll get into Hela a little bit more. So Hela, the character, debuted in Journey into Mystery. For those of you that don't know, that was Thor's comic. His comic's name was Journey into Mystery. She debuted in issue 102 back in 1964, and her look is dead on to the comic. The way that Cate Blanchett looks in this movie is dead on to what Hela looks like in the comic books. In the comics, she really just serves as the Queen of Hell, and that's Hel, Hel, the Norse version of the underworld. But in the movie, they make her the daughter of Odin. In the comic book, she's actually the daughter of Loki. So, big difference there.
Yes. I can understand why they did this for the MCU purposes, because when would Loki have had time to have a daughter?
Well, but in the comics, it's a time travel thing. Like, in the comics, Loki actually traveled back in time and fathered Hela. So, it worked for the movie. It worked for the story they were trying to tell. Odin does have a daughter that they find out about later. But her name is Angela. And so, she's supposed to...
Angela.
Yeah. And Angela in the comics, she's supposed to be like, she's from heaven.
Oh.
Yeah, Heven is how they spell it for the Thor comics. But she's from this, they end up finding out heaven is a 10th realm. So you know how they talk about the 9 realms?
Yeah.
Heaven is a 10th realm. And they end up finding out, when they find out about the 10th realm, that there is Angela. There's a whole story about Angela. I won't get into it for this. Angela is actually a character from Malibu Comics that Marvel later acquired, and she's like one of the only characters from Malibu Comics to be integrated into Marvel Comics. And this is how they retconned her, was making her the illegitimate daughter, or I guess all of his kids are illegitimate, but the daughter of Odin.
Mm-hmm.
But back to Hela. So the biggest difference, I should say, is her powers. So in the comics, she's the keeper of the afterlife. She's in charge of life and death. She can teleport in the comics. That's one of her abilities. She has the ability to bring people back from the dead, but also has the ability to kill them instantly. You know, she's pretty much the harbinger of death. She can just touch a person and boom, they're dead. They don't do that with Cate Blanchett's version of it. Cate Blanchett's version has this ability, as we see throughout the entire movie, and it's a cool visual, to pretty much create daggers, weapons, whatever you want to say, just out of thin air, and seems to be able to do an infinite amount of it with no need of anything.
Yeah, I thought the visualization of that was really cool. I'd like to see how they actually accomplished that. Just weapons out.
And I like that they even tie it in with her kind of helmet headpiece, that seems to be something that she just forms. Like, she doesn't take it on and off. It just appears and disappears. The thing is that ability is actually from the comics. There is a character called Gore. He is a character who, kind of like what Hela's doing in this, he wants to not really conquer, but he wants to take out all of the gods, because the character Gore is, if you take Job from the Bible, but make it much darker and turn Job into someone who decides instead to seek vengeance on God, that's Gore.
Interesting.
Yeah, but I won't talk about Gore an awful lot. He will come back because he does have another connection to this movie, but we'll leave it there. Our new biggest side character is Valkyrie, and this was a very loose Valkyrie from the comics. In the comics, it is Brunhilde is Valkyrie. I do believe that we are to assume that Brunhilde is actually the Valkyrie that this Valkyrie watches die in the war in the flashback that we see.
Yeah.
Tessa Thompson's Valkyrie is very similar other than that. And I couldn't really pinpoint exactly since this isn't the Brunhilde. I didn't want to say when she appeared in the comics because I'm like, well, that's the Brunhilde Valkyrie. But there are a whole bunch of other Valkyries, just like this movie showed, that they were kind of a task force that was there to battle with the Asgardians. Although in the comic books, their job is to take the dead and ride them off to Valhalla. Whereas in this movie, they more seem like the special forces for Asgard.
Yeah, like Thor saying he wanted to be one.
Yeah, until he found out they were all women. We are also introduced to the Grand Master, played by Jeff Goldblum as Jeff Goldblum.
What a gem. Yes, he was himself. They could have just said, this is Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, it worked though. It worked so well. But the character of the Grand Master, he debuted in The Avengers number 69 in 1969, so that's easy to remember. He is an Eternal, which I don't think they actually explain in this, but he's pretty much one of the most powerful beings in the universe. And
I wonder if he included in that in the, I don't know if it's a series or a movie, but they're making it the Eternals.
Yeah, which I'm curious about too, because he's not the first Eternal we've been introduced to. Benicio del Toro's The Collector in Guardians of the Galaxy is also an Eternal. In fact, he and the Grandmaster are brothers.
Oh, wow. Very cool.
Yeah, and with the Eternals coming out, it does make me wonder because I believe Kevin Feige has said that he is interested in doing more with the Collector and the Grandmaster. So we might get to see that. In the comics, the Grandmaster is blue-skinned, which I think they kind of hinted at with the little blue line on his chin. He had like a little blue eyeliner on his bottom eyelid. I don't know if that was to imply that he's got makeup on top of the blue or what that's supposed to indicate, but he's blue-skinned in the comics. But the whole idea of him having a contest of champions and that he likes to play games with heroes and villains in the cosmos and all, that is straight from the comics. Even though they tied it in with Sakaar from Planet Hulk, the whole idea of what he is doing is something he does in the comic books. And they even have a mobile app that I think is called Contest of Champions. And the Grandmaster is kind of the narrator that you hear when you hear the little storyline elements and all.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Bring that all in.
So we are also another character that, speaking of a character I would have liked to have seen more of, and I kind of hate that this is a one and done for him, but that is Karl Urban's Scourge.
Mm-hmm.
So we are introduced to Scourge, kind of filling in for Heimdall. I kind of like the thing where he's showing off and he goes, "This is my stuff."
Yes. I think for such a short time, the development in his character and the story they give his character is very well done.
Oh, I agree with that. I totally agree with that. So Scourge was first introduced in Journey into Mystery 103 back in 1964. The axe that Hela gives him is also usually what he has with him. It's an enchanted axe in the comics. You know, it has pretty much magical abilities and all. In the comics, though, he's not really connected with Hela. He's connected with a character called the Enchantress. And the Enchantress is this magical Asgardian who is actually in love with Thor. And she wants nothing but to be with Thor. Whereas Scourge is in love with the Enchantress. And so I personally would have loved to have seen Scourge make it through this movie and maybe show up in another movie and they introduce Enchantress, because I don't know why they haven't introduced her yet. We've done 3 movies now. Maybe because of the whole love element, she'll show up in the 4th one, because it is titled Love and Thunder.
Yeah.
So I think that could have been fun, having Scourge in love with Enchantress, Enchantress in love with Thor, and then Thor and Jane Foster. I think it would have made for a great storyline. They still could do Enchantress and have it kind of Enchantress versus Jane Foster's version of Thor.
Yeah.
That might be fun. They might could do that. But I think if they had Scourge around, it could have just provided a little bit more fun.
I agree.
The scene where he actually uses the assault rifles to hold off the Deadites or whatever you want to call them. That's actually something straight out of the comics. It's actually something that Scourge does in the comics. It's a turn just like it is in the movie for him, where he decides to defend people against the evil forces, and he does it with the two assault rifles. So, little connection there. What do you think of Karl Urban's performance here? Because, of course, we currently see Karl Urban in another comic books related series called The Boys. But what do you think of his take in a Marvel movie?
I think he did really well with the character he was given. I haven't watched The Boys. I've seen bits and pieces. But really the only other thing I've seen Karl Urban in is the reboot of Star Trek.
Oh, yeah.
But I think he did a really good job as Scourge. Just thinking about him being the gatekeeper, and when he gets demoted to janitor, just one thing I wanted to mention about three other characters is the Warriors 3 are taken down very quickly, even though they were fairly important characters.
One of them had to go become Shazam.
Right. Right. I forgot his name. But
Zachary Levi Zachary Levi is the actor, yeah.
Yeah. But when I first watched the movie, I was like, wow, they got rid of them fast.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing is, though, that is kind of the Ragnarok part of the story, which we'll get into a little bit more when we're getting into the comic book connections. I mean, to really be honest, have the Warriors 3 served any purpose in any of the Thor movies?
Not really. And I believe Lady Sif was featured in the series Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but we didn't really ever see her.
Well, and that's going into she was supposed to be in it. I don't know if the replacing her with Valkyrie was the plan. I know that when it was originally announced, it was announced that Lady Sif was going to be a bigger part of this movie, but then I forgot the actress who played Lady Sif, but her schedule got conflicted because she had a show, that Blind Spot, on NBC. I don't think it's still on as of right now, but at the time it was. And so there was a scheduling conflict, and she wasn't able to be in this movie.
That makes sense.
You know, you talk about the Warriors 3, though. They kill off Volstagg and Vandrel, Ray Stevens and Zachary Levi. They kill them off quickly, but Hogun actually puts up a fight.
Oh, right. You're right.
But yeah, Ray Stevens, the poor man's Punisher, he gets killed immediately. And then Vandrel, Shazam, he at least gets to charge towards her, but then he gets killed. But no, Hogun, remember, he's the one leading the whole Asgardian army to fight her.
Yeah, and then after she makes her whole scene and he says, whoever you are and whatever you want, she's like, I just said this whole thing.
Because he even gets, she stabs him and kills off everybody, and then finds out that he's not dead yet, and he actually gets where he's going to get up and try to attack her again, and then she just runs a giant spike through him. So
yes.
All right, but let's move into characters that actually come from the Planet Hulk storyline, and that's Korg and Meek. Korg, who was brilliantly voiced by the director himself. And again, this character's from the Planet Hulk storyline, although it works for a Thor movie because Korg is a Cronin, and Thor has actually fought the Cronins before.
Yeah.
And the Cronins appeared in the Dark World. So
I thought.
Yeah, which I actually think, because in the comic books, Cronins and Korg, they're kind of a yellowish orange color. They kind of look more like the Thing from the Fantastic Four.
Oh, okay.
But yet in the movie, they have this bluish, grayish tint. And I think Taika Waititi just had to go with that because, like I said, the Cronins had already been seen in the Dark World. And Lord forbid anyone have a bright orange, yellowish color in that movie.
Right.
So, but back in Journey into Mystery number 83 in 1962, the Cronins actually tried to invade Earth, and Thor fought them off. And so I think they kind of nod to that with the fact that Thor immediately knows what race he is, because, as soon as he sees him, he goes, "You're a Cronin."
Right.
And I don't know if that's a Dark World reference or if it's supposed to be a reference to the fact that Thor has encountered that race before. Then we also have Meek, who is also from the Planet Hulk storyline. Now, in the comics, he is actually a native of Sakaar. They don't state that in the movie. There's even a little joke at the very end of the movie in which Thor is trying to find out what planet Meek is from.
Yeah.
In the comics, he's a lot more humanoid. Like, he has a full body, whereas the movie version appears to be some sort of slug, grub-looking creature with a cybernetic body.
Has knives for hands.
Yes, and it has knives for hands, which seems very not useful other than to fight.
Yes.
In the comics, Meek is a much bigger character. I don't know why they chose to make him non-vocal and pretty much serve no purpose in this movie at all, other than as a fan service to, hey, look, it's Korg and Meek from Planet Hulk.
Right. Yeah, even the pop of Korg has him holding Meek under his arm.
Oh, really? I've never seen the pop. That's awesome. I did want to talk about Satur. So, Satur, if you've seen the movie and go, who's Satur? He's the big fiery monster character from the beginning and from the end. He is not only from the comics, he's actually from the Norse mythology of Ragnarok. And so it was important for him to be in this movie. He first appeared in the comic books, though, in Journey into Mystery number 99 in 1963. Although you could argue he does appear 2 issues earlier in kind of like I think it's a single panel, just kind of a cameo tease, whatever. But he officially appeared in issue 99. Again, his look, just like Hela straight out of the comics, looks exactly like he's supposed to look. Not only is he an important part of the Ragnarok story, but I just wanted to point out he is voiced by Clancy Brown.
Who is that?
You don't know who Clancy Brown is?
I don't.
Okay. First off, as an actor, you see him in things, but you don't really connect him with anything as an actor. The biggest thing I connect him with, because it's my all-time favorite movie, is The Shawshank Redemption. He plays Hadley, the guard, the main guard. But his voice... Okay, you ready for this?
Yes.
Clancy Brown is, for our modern audience, Clancy Brown is the voice of Mr. Krabs on SpongeBob SquarePants.
That is fantastic.
But not only that, for our Marvel-loving fans, Clancy Brown has been the voice of the Red Hulk in all of the Disney XD Marvel stuff. So from any Avengers to that Hulk Agents of Smash animated series, Clancy Brown is the Red Hulk. In the horrible Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern movie, Clancy Brown is the voice of Parallax.
I have to see I'm going to have to look up what he looks like later. I feel like I know who that is.
Yeah, but like I said, this is all voice actor work.
Yeah.
But even more famously, Clancy Brown, way back in the 90s and early 2000s, was the voice of Lex Luthor in the Superman animated series and the Justice League animated series for Cartoon Network.
So he voiced our childhoods.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, and there's so many other things you can find that Clancy Brown was the voice of, but that's just a few. And so it's so cool that for such a small part, he's got a few lines in the opening where he explains what Ragnarok is. Mm-hmm. And then at the end, he just kind of yells, I'm going to destroy Asgard or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he is voiced by Clancy Brown. And what better little connection could you have with comics and this voice who has been around for all of these comic book stuff and all that? Great. Yeah. Just love it. I don't want to talk about Odin, really. Anthony Hopkins plays Odin once again, but I did want to point out that I didn't really like the portrayal of Odin in this, where he was kind of this old man who was thinking about his life, and he was caring about his two sons and saying goodbye to them, and how sweet this all was, because he's never been like that in the comics.
Yeah.
Odin in the comic books is exactly what Hela says that Odin is. When Hela is explaining who Odin is and what type of conqueror and, mad king that he was, that's exactly what Odin is in the comics.
Yeah.
So I wasn't really digging the sweet, caring Odin.
The sweet father Odin.
Yeah. All right, so let's move on into the moving panels. I want to start off with a story arc called The Unworthy Thor. Are you familiar with The Unworthy Thor?
I'm not.
So The Unworthy Thor is a storyline that came out in November of 2016. It follows right after a story arc called Original Sin. I won't get into the Original Sin story arc, but something happens in the Original Sin story arc that leads into The Unworthy Thor. So let's talk about that. In the Original Sin story arc, Thor is told something by Nick Fury. Nick Fury just whispers something in his ears. We don't find out until the Unworthy Thor storyline what he said, but it's not Nick Fury. I'll go ahead and say that. Nick Fury whispers something into Thor's ear, which causes Thor to immediately drop Mjolnir, and Thor can't pick him back up because Thor is now unworthy.
Oh, wow.
Which leads to a storyline called The Unworthy Thor, which was a 6-part storyline. This is actually going into what the next Thor movie will be, Love and Thunder. This is actually when Jane Foster is able to wield Mjolnir and receives the power of Thor. So in this story arc, this is where Thor gets the look that he has in this movie. He gets the short hair.
Yeah.
And kind of has that look. So that look is from the comics. It wasn't just Chris Hemsworth going, I don't want long hair anymore and I don't want to wear a wig or whatever it was. It's a look from the comics. He does become a prisoner. However, in the comics, it's of the Collector, not the Grand Master. It's the Collector. It's the Benicio del Toro character.
Yeah. Very interesting. And in the MCU, he will have seen him before because he gave the ether to him in the terrible movie that's Dark World.
Yeah. But in that, he no longer has the name Thor because, again, he doesn't find himself worthy. So he just calls himself Odinson. And that's about the only connection that there is really the look. But it's a fascinating story if you're ever interested. But it's called the Unworthy Thor.
Very interesting.
And of course, there is the fact that this is called Ragnarok, and there is a story arc called Ragnarok from the comic books. It was Thor number 80 through 85 in August of 2004. So not an extremely old storyline, but it is something that happened. So in the storyline of Ragnarok, Loki, who again is a villain in the comics, straight up and down, no hero aspect in the comics, Loki is actually seeking the tools that created Mjolnir. And Loki wants to create his own Mjolnir. And he finds it. And he gets Surtur, big, fire-looking monster that you saw in Ragnarok. Loki gets him to create weapons like Mjolnir, hammers, axe-looking weapons. And he does. Yeah. But it is very clear that these weapons are extremely powerful, but not as powerful as Mjolnir.
Yeah.
But Loki looks at it as quantity over quality.
Yeah.
Pretty much if Loki and all of his henchmen all have one of these, they should be able to take down Thor and Mjolnir. And in this Ragnarok storyline, they actually do attack Thor, and Mjolnir is destroyed in the battle when Mjolnir is hit by, I think 4, maybe 5 of these weapons. He's fighting with them, but then they all hit at the same time, and it shatters Mjolnir. So the whole breaking of Mjolnir is from the Ragnarok comic book.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I didn't know if that real with Hela. Like, I wonder if her actual powers, because her being able to break it kind of lends to her being able to touch someone and they die. Like the powers in her hands.
Yeah.
To like destroy.
Yeah, it's a good thought. Yeah, they don't really even explain that, like how she was just able to grab it and squeeze it. But we do have that in the comic books. And then just like you talked about earlier with the Warriors 3, Loki and his band of villains, which include Ferris, that giant wolf from the movie.
Okay.
And then there's a few others, but when they attack Asgard, they just kill everybody. They kill the Warriors 3, they kill Valkyrie, the Brunhilde version of Valkyrie. They kill everybody except Thor. So that is even, again, out of the comics. Thor, in an attempt to stop Ragnarok, he ends up going to this like well of wisdom. I think it has a name, but I don't remember it. He goes to this well of wisdom, and he's pretty much told that he has to make a sacrifice. And he remembers that Odin had sacrificed his eye to the well. So that explains the eye.
Yes.
And so Thor decides to rip out his eye.
Great.
And sacrifice his eye. Although it doesn't work, because as he finds out, he is told, you can't sacrifice a single eye. That has been done before.
Oh.
So instead of going, well, okay, how about an ear or how about a pinky? No, Thor just rips out his other eye.
Oh my goodness.
So first off, the whole losing an eye is from the Ragnarok storyline. However, in the Ragnarok storyline, he loses them both.
Yeah.
He is able to see, I think he's able to see from the help of the ravens, the crows that are always with Odin. I think they show up to help Thor be able to see. So they kind of serve as his eyes and whatnot. And Thor learns more about Ragnarok, but then he finds out he also has to die. And so he hangs himself, and he is then sent to Hela. Because again, remember I said earlier, Hela in the comics is in charge of the afterlife. He encounters Hela, so that's the only connection that Hela has with the Ragnarok comic book storyline. Although he's then rescued from hell by the spirit of his father Odin. He then learns about the runes, and he actually becomes what is known in the comics as Rune King Thor, which we saw in this movie. That is when he realizes in the movie he is the god of thunder and becomes, this lightning-infused Thor with the glowing blue eyes and all. That's what Rune King Thor is. And he is the most powerful Thor has ever been in the comic books.
It's called Rune King?
Yes, Rune, Rune King Thor. Alright, so the Ragnarok storyline is very dark. Of course, this movie is not. It is a big storyline for Thor in the comics. He doesn't stop Ragnarok, just like in this movie. He doesn't stop Ragnarok, but he does end it, because in the comics, it's established that Ragnarok is cyclical, and so it happens, and then all of the Asgardians are reincarnated, and it just starts all over. And that's the way it plays out in the comics. But in this storyline, Thor puts an end to it. He does something that, again, destroys Asgard. In the comics, he reestablishes Asgard actually in Oklahoma.
Which seems kind of like where they ended up in Endgame.
Yeah,
I'm not sure exactly.
I can't remember where they were in Endgame. I'd have to go back. But in the comic books, he reestablishes Asgard in Oklahoma, which I just think is funny. But Thor then, after the events of Ragnarok, he decides to take the sleep of the gods, which, if you remember, Odin was doing in the first Thor movie. He takes the sleep of the gods, which puts him out of action for 3 years. And I literally mean that. Thor was not in the comics for the next 3 years.
That's honestly kind of cool that the writers took that literally. Like they made it in real time.
Well, they did it for the same reason that Planet Hulk happens. So they did it because it took Thor out of the Avengers Disassembled storyline, which was what was currently happening. It took him out of the House of M storyline, and it took him out of Planet Hulk and Civil War.
Oh, okay.
Which, if you know, that's what Planet Hulk is. It was the way they got Hulk out of the storylines before Civil War happened in the comics.
That's pretty cool that like the Planet Hulk and Ragnarok were the accurate reasons for them not to be in that story.
Yeah, because as the comics would allude, is that if you're going to split the superheroes against each other, then if one side got both Hulk and Thor, that side wins.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So, yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. Which, again, going back and talking about those Team Thor little shorts, I think some people forget that neither one of them are in Captain America Civil War.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah, which we kind of get that in, at least in the movies, we kind of did get that in Age of Ultron, because you had Thor. He wasn't really involved in Age of Ultron either, because he's getting was it Age of Ultron or was it Infinity War that he gets the visions of Ragnarok? Yeah.
Yeah, Scarlet Witch does it to him.
So he gets the visions of Ragnarok. And then we had, like I said, even though Hulk is in Age of Ultron, he then leaves off on the Quinjet. So it kind of explains why he is not involved in Civil War. Which brings me to the last little comic connection here, and that's Planet Hulk. Planet Hulk in The Incredible Hulk, issues 92 through 105, in April of 2006 through June of 2007. This, of course, was... in the comics, Hulk is purposefully sent off of Earth. He is sent away by a group who is called the Illuminati. It's Reed Richards, Doctor Strange, I think, Black Bolt. They decide that it is better that Hulk no longer be on Earth because he is potentially going to destroy Earth. And so they just decide to trick him and get him onto a shuttle. Their plan, though, was to send him to a uninhabited planet where he could just live peacefully alone. That, of course, doesn't happen. He gets knocked off course, sucked through a black hole portal, whatever it is, and he ends up on Sakaar, and which he then is enslaved, becomes a gladiator to fight for the Red King, becomes the most popular star gladiator, just like what happens in the movie. The only difference is that the Planet Hulk storyline is supposed to be that the Red King, who is leading over Sakaar, is a horrible leader. And Hulk then leads a revolt against the Red King. And it's weird, they kind of implied that at the very end of this movie with the Grand Master, when he gets out of the ship and all of the natives are there, and he goes, "Oh, God, y'all did great. This revolution was wonderful." And then jokingly says, "Let's just call it a tie." But earlier in the movie, they implied that he's telling all of them to go after Thor and Hulk, and so I was very confused by that.
Yeah, that I guess is one of the little plot hole type things.
Yeah,
that happens with end credit scenes.
Yeah, I didn't really get that one. But they also left out in Planet Hulk, Hulk actually has a love interest, and so they, of course, threw all that out, which that I understood and all. But, that, again, this was the closest we're going to get to Planet Hulk and a solo Hulk movie. I'll accept it, but I really do want to see a live-action Planet Hulk.
That would be, and I suppose because the Hulk in real time was there for a while, they could really make a spin-off if they wanted.
Well, it doesn't even matter about you saying real time, because it's implied, it's not implied, it's said when Thor sees Loki and he's talking about how long have you been here, and Grandmaster actually says time works differently here.
Right.
So there's no telling how long really Hulk had been there.
Right. Yeah. I like you said, I would also very much enjoy a whole Planet Hulk movie. like just Bruce Banner as the Hulk the whole time, but not like his weird smart Hulk in Endgame.
Yeah, of course, that's for another episode, but I kind of like this Hulk, a Hulk that could still talk, but it was very, short sentences and not grammatical. And
right, the Hulk.
Yeah. All right, so any other things you want to bring up or discuss before we get into our final decisions?
One of the things I wanted to ask, and I think it's true, is that this is the first time in the MCU that we actually see the classic Hulk helmet, like him wearing it when he's fighting in the gladiator fight, if I'm remembering correctly.
You're talking about Hulk or Thor?
Thor. Did I say Hulk?
Yeah, you said the Hulk helmet, and I'm going, the only helmet Hulk wears is the Planet Hulk helmet. Oh, yeah, the winged Thor helmet. Yes. No, I think they kind of showed it in the first movie, if I'm remembering right, but he doesn't really don it. I think this is the first time we get a winged helmet. Of course, a very stylized winged helmet, but we get a winged helmet, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's all I really wanted to mention, because I saw that and thought that was pretty cool that they brought that in, even if it was just for a short moment. But it was a very cool moment.
Yeah, when he puts it on and flips it down. No, it's very, very cool. And of course, that leads into the great, I know him. We work together. All right, so let's get into our final decision. This is where we rate the movie based off of the way we would treat the comic. We either bag it, stack it, or trade it. So go ahead, Deanna. Do you bag it, stack it, or trade it?
This one, I would definitely bag it. Even though, according to what you said, I'd have to bag quite a few different comics to make this movie. But I very much enjoyed this one. One of those I could put on at any time and continue to watch.
Yeah, I agree. We kind of already alluded to this earlier. I mean, this is in my top 10, if not really close to the top 5. It's fun from beginning to end. I mean, even the opening scene, Taika Waititi immediately lets you know what type of movie you're in. When first off, you get the narration from Thor. The original Thor movie and Thor Dark World, they're narrated by Odin. But this one gets narrated by Thor at the beginning. And then you immediately get this, what seems to be this very serious moment with Surtur, and then it immediately gets interrupted by the fact that Thor is slowly spinning. And he's like, oh, nope, wait a minute. I'll be back around in a minute. And it establishes the mood. Like I said, this is the best we're going to get of a Hulk movie, and I'm a big fan of the Hulk, especially the Mark Ruffalo version. It's got the humor, it's got the action, it's a great story from beginning to end. I love even the story that it tells. We talked about the unworthy Thor, and that in that storyline, Thor realizes that all gods are unworthy. That moment when he comes into the Great Hall and he looks up and he sees that mural and he finds out the truth about Odin.
Yes.
The fact that this movie doesn't immediately go to the unworthiness, but lets Thor, he kind of comes to a realization, because Thor, throughout all of these movies, Thor has been, the team captain of the football team when it comes to Asgard. Go Asgard. And now he's realizing what Asgard is, which they then bring into the fact of what Heimdall kind of explains to him, is that the Asgard you want, Thor, is not a place, it's a people. It's an idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that aspect of it, which gives us this whole different version of Thor, which we would then see in the Infinity War and Endgame storylines, which is a whole nother great turn of that character. But yeah, no, definitely a bag it up, watch it over and over again. Watch the first Thor movie to learn about Thor, skip Dark World, and then watch Thor Ragnarok.
And everything would probably still make sense. The only reason you need Dark World is to know about the ether. But then just watch Infinity War and you'll be fine.
Yeah, I was going to say, then you don't really, because because it's even one of the Power Stones that they don't even care about after Dark World. The Power Stone is important because in Guardians of the Galaxy, of course, the Time Stone is important to Doctor Strange, and the Soul Stone is important because of Vision. But no, that ether, I even forgot what stone it's supposed to represent. But yeah, it just doesn't seem to be important. It's reality, isn't it? It's the reality stone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Just watch Infinity War.
Right.
All right. Well, thanks, Deanna. Thanks for returning to the co-host chair. Hopefully, we will get to have you back to discuss yet another movie.
Sounds awesome.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for Moving Panels. I'm Laramy Wells, and I'll see you on the other side of the page.